Hey everyone, my name is Dillon Gonzales. I'm the editorial director for GeekVibesNation.com and also a co-host of the Home Dance Film Festival podcast. And I am so excited to be here with you once again for another installment of Exploring the Warner Archive. I am here to discuss one of my absolute favorite labels. Now, I usually host the main Video Addict show with my colleague Michael Vaughn, but those who've seen this series before know I like to go a little bit deeper into the Warner Archive and find some interesting titles, do some new releases, some older releases that I think may have been overlooked for the time, and put them back on your radar. So I am going to start out with a trio of newer titles that were supposed to come out in September and were held over until October, and then I'm going to get into some seasonally appropriate titles for spooky season. But first, I'll start off with the neo-noir Palmetto from the late 90s. Now, anyone who's familiar with the Warner Archive knows that they tend to stick with titles more towards like the first half of the 20th century, or they've gotten to that more so in the recent years. But occasionally they'll do some like 90s and even you'll see 2000s in my next titles to kind of just give a more well-rounded representation of their archive. And this I had never actually heard of this one, but I was very excited given the cast. We got Woody Harrelson, Elizabeth Shue, Gina Gershon's in here, Chloe Sevigny has a small role in this, or not so small role in this, but an important role. But this is for people who love neo-noirs because it is it's a classic structure where Woody Harrelson plays a fresh out of prison ex-con who is potentially going to try to get his life back in order, but he gets mixed up in basically a kidnap for hire plot where he is going to kidnap the daughter of like a wealthy man, hold her for ransom, but everyone's in on it. The daughter's in on it, the man's wife's in on it. They're just trying to kind of like scheme him out of some money. But as things tend to do in these types of scenarios, things don't always go according to plan, and some bodies start piling up. There's some double crosses, there's some conniving, there's just people sweating bullets that they're going to get caught for different things. It's just all kind of the main elements that you expect from this type of story. And overall, I think it's good, not great. I think all of the elements there are there to like be very entertaining, and it is very entertaining overall. I just think that overall this one kind of doesn't give enough character development to some of the female characters, especially the Gina Gershon character who plays Woody Harrelson's girlfriend that he's like staying with fresh out of prison. She's kind of more so kind of like the lady in waiting role where she's kind of trying to guide him back towards like a path of being like on the good side of things, but other than that, she's not really given a lot to do besides just being kind of like the girlfriend who wants him to be the best version of himself. Elizabeth Shue is very sexy and very like alluring in her kind of like femme fatale role. She's kind of like spinning her web around Woody Harrelson and getting him all involved in this plot. But I wouldn't say this is anything super special, but if you're a fan of the genre, it does it well enough. I just wish I was wanting a little bit more, but I don't need anything more from this Blu-ray presentation because it looks fantastic. It's from a new 2023 HD master from Warner Archive. This looks very nice. All the film grain is nicely resolved, and there's no nicks or scratches or anything like any damage of the sort. Everything's resolved well. Pretty much you can expect really good quality from Warner Archive across the board, so you're going to hear me saying a lot of the same stuff throughout this video, but this is a really good presentation. 5.1 sounds really amazing. The colors on this one are really good. This is like a seaside town, so you get a lot of like vibrant kind of like oceanside colors and stuff. So this doesn't really have much in the way of special features besides the theatrical trailer, but the AV presentation is strong enough that if you're a fan, I think you'll be pleased overall with this presentation. And as I mentioned, for my next title, going a little bit into the 2000s, this is the critically acclaimed Before Night Falls, and this is from director Julian Schnabel. based on a story based on the life of the Cuban poet Reynaldo Arianes, played by Javier Bardem. So this kind of is like a all-encompassing story from like his young childhood until his spoiler death. It's not a spoiler. It's like this is set quite a bit in the past, but this is a really powerful tale because it's this poet, this artist trying to exist in Cuba in a time as like a queer man in a time where it's not very accepting, and he starts getting a little bit of notoriety for his poems and books that he puts out, but then he starts having to like battle against censorship, and then he gets kind of framed for certain crimes by the government that he did not commit, and so there's all kinds of this man trying to exist in against an authoritarian power in a time where it's just very hard for a queer person to exist, and it's a all-encompassing story. I won't go beat by beat, but it's told in a story that it doesn't feel like a traditional biopic. It's very kind of artistically driven and very nuanced, but also very beautiful. Like Julian Schnabel is a painter by trade. He's also a very talented filmmaker, but primarily he's a painter, and he uses the frame as a canvas that he kind of paints his vision on, and it works very well, especially since you have Javier Bardem playing the main character, and he was actually nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor. He did not win, but that kind of put him on everyone's radar very early on, and it's a really incredible performance. There's a lot of great ensemble players as well, but Javier is the main reason to watch. And this comes from a new 4K scan of the original camera negative, and it looks terrific. Like I said, this is a very visually sumptuous movie, and this AV presentation captures it perfectly, and the audio sounds really great. It's presented in the original mixture of English and Spanish. There are forced English subtitles for the non-English speaking or non-English dialogue there, but there are also English SDH subtitles optional for those who desire them, but it's presented in original language. And then you also, for this one, you get a pretty good amount of special features. You get a commentary track with features Julian Schnabel, Javier Bardem, and an array of other people like the cinematographer and like a casting director and all kinds of different like screenwriter people. They're kind of all woven together. They're recorded separately, but there's like 5 or 6 different people that show up on this track that give some really good background. So there's really hardly any dead air on this one. There's also a couple different featurettes with Julian Schnabel where you can kind of see him like touring some of his artwork. You get a real life interview from quite a bit in the past with a real life Arianes whenever he was alive. You get a trailer, a bunch of different stuff on here. So this is a pretty well-rounded presentation, and this was very critically acclaimed whenever it was released in the early 2000s, and I think that was especially a reason why Warner Archive gave the rare 2000s movie their treatment, and they did a really nice job for this one, and I think fans will be very pleased. But the last title that I'm catching up on from the holdovers from September is a more in the wheelhouse of Warner Archive. It's what you kind of expect from them, and that is Christopher Strong, which is the second starring, or the second film, first, I believe, starring role for Katharine Hepburn, and she is very, very, very good in this, as you would expect from Katharine Hepburn. She plays a woman who I really like. That this is directed by one of the most prominent female directors from this time, Dorothy Arzner, who she unfortunately was one of the only major female directors from this time. But she directs this movie about a woman aviator who gets caught up with a married man and kind of gets ingratiated into his family, and each of them kind of like start slowly falling for one another, but they are trying to kind of fight their feelings and stuff. But there is just that kind of like undeniable chemistry between them, and the fallout from this is basically what the movie is, and how it kind of resolves itself between this man who is very much in love with his wife still, but he has met this new person, and there's all kinds of melodrama within this. And the ending, I kind of struggled a little bit with the ending, especially with some of what the characters choose to do. But based on the material, I don't think it was like out of character. I just personally, I didn't understand why certain things had to happen. But other than that, I think this is handled very well, especially since I think this tale, directed by a man, which it normally would have been at this time, would have been much more like blunt and kind of like less finessed than Arzner ends up creating for this. I think there's a good balance between, like, there's no really like victim or like blame shifted on any certain like person that might have been like blamed otherwise, and I think it's handled very well. So overall, I did really like this. I just kind of had a little bit of issue with the ending, but it's impactful, I'll tell you that. This looks really, really good. This comes from a 4K scan or restoration of the original camera negative. Looks pristine. It looks amazing. Well resolved grain. No like density fluctuations or fluttering, anything like that. It's what you expect from Warner Archive. It looks really good. There are a couple of different shorts on this one, a couple animated and like some live action shorts, just for kind of extra bonus content, and I always love that. So if you're a Katharine Hepburn fan, definitely check out Christopher Strong. She's very good in this, but the rest of the cast is also equally good. Now here's where I want to shift gears a little bit and go a little bit more into the like past for Warner Archives. And I picked a selection of titles that I was interested. Some of these I'd seen before, some of these were new to me, but I wanted to try to get some spooky season titles. Not all of these are like prime like horror movies. There's a lot of like more prominent horror titles that you may already know that are in the Warner Archive, like the Mystery of the Wax Museum or Dr. X or Mad Love, anything like that you may have heard of before. And some of these, of course, you've heard before, but I wanted to get kind of like a wide array of different kind of genres within the spooky season time. All that being said, I am starting off with a premiere title, and that is the Alfred Hitchcock collection, which collects 4 individually released titles into one package that were released quite a bit like early in the line's run, from usually like 2017, 2016 era. So we have Suspicion, missing disc, I Confess, The Wrong Man, and Dial M for Murder. So yes, this packaging is a little bit perilous, but pop that right back in there and we're good to go. Luckily, it did not land data side down, so we're all good. So I'm not going to spend too much time with these because it's Alfred Hitchcock and most people know these, but these are all really great. We got Suspicion with Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine, about a newly married couple that the suspicions or they marry in a whirlwind, but then once they start to get to know each other, like they start to realize they don't know as much about each other as they think they do, and then it kind of escalates and escalates until there's the potential of like, oh, maybe one of them might be a murderer, and they kind of like, the suspicion kicks in. Dial M for Murder, that's probably the most well known of this one. It involves a man trying to arrange the murder of his wife, and with like an old classmate, and kind of like planning it all out, and how that kind of unravels with like his carefully crafted plan doesn't actually go according to plan. And I Confess is an interesting one because all of these tales involve like murder and mystery, but I Confess, you kind of know all the pieces right at the beginning, but what makes this one special is Montgomery Clift plays a priest who cannot break the sacrament of, he gets accused of a crime that he knows one of his parishioners committed, but he is so committed to his faith that he is not going to give that person up. And it's kind of like it's a frustrating tale, but it's kind of admirable or interesting at least, how committed he is to his religion and how that kind of like he'll protect that at all costs, and it's an interesting moral kind of reckoning. The Wrong Man is Henry Fonda is like accused, mistaken for like a bank robber, and how that kind of shakes out and everything. And once again, there's a lot of like mistaken identities, murders, mysteries, all this kind of stuff within this collection, and it kind of gives you that. It doesn't give you the traditional like scares, but it kind of like puts you on edge and it makes you very tense, wondering how things are going to end up. Hitchcock is the master of suspense for a reason, and he does like a really good job with these 4 titles. And so I had a couple of these titles individually before, but I did want to get this shelf-friendly packaging because I need all the shelf space I can get. But I also like them kind of all like nicely compact here together, and all these releases are really good. But there's a little bit of inconsistency, which I'll kind of point out in here in just a second. First, I'll just start out with Suspicion. That comes from a 2K scan of the inner positive, or no, 2K scan of the fine grain positive, and it looks really nice. It's a really good presentation. All of these I would say are a pretty good presentation, except Dial for Murder, which I'll get into in a second. But yeah, Suspicion looks really great. It sounds really great. It comes with a 22-minute making of featurette, which is really cool. I Confess is also from a 2K scan of the fine grain positive, and it also looks very good. And it has a 21-minute making of featurette, and it also has a very brief, like 1-minute newsreel from the premiere, which is pretty cool. The Wrong Man, once again, fine grain 2K scan of the fine grain, and it has a 21-minute making of. Also looks really good. Dial In for Murder is the anomaly here, and I had this come up on my last Warner Archive video, where there are some titles that the Warner Archive re-releases that were not produced by them. So last time it was an Elvis documentary. This time it is Dial In for Murder, which the main line of Warner Home Video put out in 2012, I believe, and they decided to bring that back into print and include it in this collection. So it's included with all the Warner Archive discs, but it's not like officially a Warner Archive produced disc. So you do have some limitations, I would say, because Warner Home Video, they did what they could at the time this was released, but I think this is the one that I would really want to have a new restoration sometime in the future and hopefully get a 4K. I think it would really benefit it, because there's like a little bit of inconsistency and like kind of haloing that I don't think works really well. And it's not just because this does include both the 2D and 3D version of the movie, which is a cool special feature, but overall there's some inconsistency in the video quality. But it also comes with a 22-minute making of featurette, just like all the other Hitchcock movies are. Yes, so despite Dial In for Murder not looking as strong as the other 3, it is best and only version out right now. So if you want kind of like a budget-friendly, compact release, this Alfred Hitchcock collection from the Warner Archive, it'll serve you very well. I think if you're wanting to like baby step into Hitchcock, if you're kind of new to him, I think this is a good set. It's not too expensive, but he has more mainstream movies, but it's a good kind of baseline for him. I'm going into like a pair of techno horror titles, and the first one is Demon Seed with Julie Christie, which I had seen this cover for years from the Warner Archive. I did not know this movie, but I was like, okay, Demon Seed, it's like kind of like a possession movie. Okay, let's see how this goes. I did not read a synopsis, but this was very surprising what it was about. This is actually about like a computer that kind of gains sentience through a mad scientist who's like trying to push the boundaries of technology, and he kind of loses control of it whenever it infects his house and kind of takes over all of his like appliances that he's kind of like he's hooked up the whole house to be like kind of like technology forward. So this AI is basically able to come into this house, take over everything, and torture the man's wife, played by Julie Christie. And then what you come to realize is this computer that kind of is like a takeoff of like Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey. He wants to procreate and he wants to have a child with this woman, and this woman is just, she's put through the ringer. And I think Julie Christie, there are times where she really sells it. I think there are also times where I think you can kind of see that she thinks it's a little bit silly, and it is a very silly film. But there are some effective moments within this. So I think it's very inconsistent, but overall, I think it's worth a watch. It's definitely thought-provoking, and it's very eerie in that it kind of predicted how a lot of things would be happening these days with like artificial intelligence and how they kind of infect our lives and stuff. So overall, it's a mid like level thriller for me. Like there's things I really like about it. There's things I'm not the biggest fan of, but overall it does a pretty decent job. But this does get a pretty good presentation. It comes from a 2K scan of the inner positive. Looks really nice. I didn't see much in the way of any kind of inconsistencies or damage or anything like that. It's just a really well done transfer from kind of earlier on from the Warner Archives output. This does only come with a trailer, but overall it's a pretty solid presentation. If you're a fan of kind of like technology run amok movies, it's probably worth checking out, but it's not my favorite of like this batch of movies that we're talking about. And unfortunately that kind of goes the same for Looker, which is another technology-based movie from Michael Crichton, who like wrote Jurassic Park and a bunch of movies. And so this is also very eerily kind of tied into the present day. This is about a plastic surgeon who kind of gets caught up in this conspiracy where a bunch of his patients who he's worked on in the recent months, they start dying. They usually are said to like die by suicide, but there's a little bit of mystery behind it. And what you come to learn is there's kind of like a mysterious organization that all these women are tied to. These are all kind of like television commercial actresses. And what you learn is that there's like a computer program that's being developed in order to basically create artificial intelligence, like computer generated actors who can like be tuned to be the most beautiful specimens and kind of use their likenesses to kind of like sell products and like brainwash people and stuff. So it's a very complicated, sometimes like loopy plot that doesn't always connect perfectly narratively wise. I think there's a lot of like shortcomings, but what sells this for me, at least what I got the most enjoyment from, was the performers, including Albert Finney as the main character here, right here. And then you have James Coburn here as kind of like a malevolent character. He's kind of like over the company who is like implementing these strategies. Overall, it's even less consistent than Demon Seed. I think there are some thrilling moments, and I think some of the technology stuff is interesting, but it just, I don't know, there seems to be some like elements missing and some like narrative leaps that I'm just not quite ready to take in this. Like, I love a good just kind of mindless thriller, but I wish there had been a little bit more thought put into this. I think I give it credit for like predicting so much of what our society is right now, with like the actors fighting for their like likenesses and use like computer generated imagery. But overall, it's one of the more inconsistent titles I'm speaking of right now. And the next one is also inconsistent, but in more of kind of like a so bad it's good kind of way. I'm moving into like a pair of creature features. And the first one, this one was wild. I just had to watch it. This is From Hell It Came. Anyone who loves a really dumb creature feature, like Mystery Science Theater 3000 level stuff, I think you'll enjoy this for like in a jokey kind of way. It is kind of set in like a Polynesian island, and it's about a kind of like a prince who is like unjustly murdered, and his spirit comes back as this like tree monster that kind of lumbers around very slowly, and people for some reason just stand around and go for way too long until they can get killed by the tree monster, and it's ridiculous. And there's a lot of problematic stuff with like the Polynesian tribe and how they are kind of like depicted. It is very kind of backwards thinking, but it's a part of this like era of filmmaking where no one was really wanting to be socially conscious or sensitive, so they're kind of just like portrayed as like I said, like savages, witch doctors, all that kind of stuff. And but if you do like a creature feature, From Hell It Came, it's good, campy fun, but it's not a classic by any means. But this comes from a 2K scan of the fine grain, and it looks really nice. It's a really good presentation for a movie that's not very good, but it looks really great. And so I'm glad Warner Archive doesn't judge that much. Like, they're not going to give lesser care just because the quality isn't as good as like Citizen Kane or Gone with the Wind or anything. But this only comes with the trailer, so you're not going to get much context for this one. But if you're a fan of like this type of movie, it's a really good presentation. This one's better, definitely. I wanted to check this one out because I recently covered a Irwin Allen Master of Disaster collection for Shout Studios. So I was in the mood for destruction, and this is another Irwin Allen joint. This is The Swarm, which has Michael Caine. That's an animated Michael Caine. And this has an array of people here. Like I said, Michael Caine, Henry Fonda, Olivia de Havilland, Lee Grant, Fred McMurray, Richard Widmark, Catherine Ross, so many people in this. And this is pretty much what you think, especially here, The Swarm. This is a killer bee movie, and it is long as hell because this is the extended version. This is 2.5 hours long of crazy bee carnage, which it's very campy. It's very very illogical at times, and there are points where you're like, their reasoning for not like killing the bees for certain reasons are frustrating, and then how they end up trying to actually kill the bees, you're like, well, why are you doing this? Why don't you just do this? So you'll be questioning it a lot, but overall, if you love like campy, like I said, insect attack movies, it does what it needs to do. But it is, like I said, 2.5 hours long. So I think I wish they would have included the kind of the shorter cut that had been edited as an option. I don't want them not to restore the extended cut, but I would have liked to have the option in case I wanted to not spend 2.5 hours and maybe spend 2 hours. Who knows? But overall, if you like a animal attack movie, bee attack movie, there's some fun to it. There's like crazy destruction, and just like there's some really good special effects work, and just the bees. This is at a time where we didn't have the CGI to create like these digital bees, so you get real bees and they will make your skin crawl. So this comes from, once again, a 2K scan of the Inner Positive. Looks fantastic, really good. No issues with it. This does come, like I said, with the extended edition and a 22-minute making of featurette where you get to see all the actors try to do their best acting of like explaining why they are excited about this feature and stuff. But overall, it's a nice little supplement to this. And finally, I know there's been some inconsistencies in like a lot of titles in here that are like, oh, this is bad, but it's fun. This one, I wanted to end with a banger because this is arguably like the most impressive title that Warner Archive has released from like a packaging spectacle, because they put a lot of work into producing extras for this, which they don't always do. This is The Curse of Frankenstein from Hammer Films, which I don't think I have to explain Hammer Films too much for people who are watching a boutique video, like YouTube video. But I will say that Hammer Films, they put out some really interesting work, and their take on Frankenstein is definitely effective. This has Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in kind of some breakout roles. Christopher Lee as the Frankenstein's monster, Peter Cushing as an unhinged Frankenstein. This pretty much follows what you think of whenever you think of a Frankenstein story, of like a mad scientist who's going too far and trying to reanimate like his own kind of science experiment, and it kind of gets out of control and people start dying, but it's given a Hammer spin because it's a little bit more gnarly and gross and grotesque, and it just kind of delivers kind of the grisliness that you kind of want from this story if you're kind of a sicko like me. I think overall it's a very fun, effective tale, and especially with these two formers like at the center of it. And this is one of the films that helped kind of define Hammer in like the popular culture. It really kind of put them on the map. And so yeah, this Warner Archive pulled out all the stops. So as I talked about, so you have the main feature disc over here, which includes two different aspect ratios for the main feature film. I believe it's 1.85 by 1 and 1.66 by 1. Both of those, you get different aspect ratios to choose which one is your preference based on like what territory was providing it. And then also on the second disc here, you get a third aspect ratio, which is the full screen 1.33 by 1, or 1.37 by 1, my mistake. It's an open matte version, which Warner Archive included because by their reasoning, they figured that a lot of people had grown up watching this on VHS and were kind of more familiar with that framing, that kind of square framing. So they wanted to provide that option for people. So all in all, in this package, you get 3 different aspect ratios for this to choose from. So dealer's choice. And you also, like I said, they produce new special features for this. So you get an audio commentary. You get 4 new featurettes, one about kind of like the Hammer as a company, one about Gothic horror, one about the cinematography, and one about the score, the composition. So you also get like a theatrical trailer and stuff. And these featurettes, they're not paltry. They're run about 20 minutes each, which is pretty like a pretty substantial amount of special features. So overall, packaging wise, I don't think you could ask for better. And if you're a Hammer fan, you probably already own this, but for those who haven't picked it up, this is a fantastic release from Warner Archive. So this kind of gives you kind of like the thrills and chills you expect from like the Halloween spooky season. But overall, a good array of titles here. Not all great, but all interesting in their own way. So you got this this nice collection here for everyone there. If you still have a little bit of time to pick up some of these for your Halloween viewing, if you so choose. But I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Warner Archive and their many treasures. I will be back again next month for a whole new batch of titles. Let me know what you're going to check out. Let me know what you want me to cover in the future. If you know someone who would be a fan of this video who you have not shown yet, send it to them. I would love for you to check it out. And just make sure you're subscribed and like the video. But I really appreciate you watching. I really appreciate you taking the time. I will see you next time. But until then, enjoy these movies.